Welcome to Happy Talks with Dr. Alice and Donovan. Dr. Alice Fong is a holistic naturopathic doctor and founder of Amour de Soi Wellness. And Donovon Jenson is a software engineer and founder of HowToHappy.com. Together, they're out to cause more happiness in the world.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Happy Talks. My name is Dr. Alice, and this is my amazing co-host, Donovan. And today is a very special episode near and dear to my heart. I am going to be sharing my miscarriage story, and I brought two of my dear friends, Devin and Tatiana, to share their stories because I think it's what we've all discussed from this experience, that it's not really talked about enough, and that it's really an important conversation to have because it shouldn't feel shameful or something that we have to bottle up inside and hide and keep from the world. I mean, use your own discretion. Of course, if that's what you feel like you need, then that's maybe best for you, but you get to decide that. And I don't want people to feel like they have to be stopped because of the shame perhaps around it. And so I don't know how this conversation is going to go. I might have a breakdown. I might not. Like sometimes I can talk about my miscarriage and be totally fine, normal. And other times, like just on Saturday, I hadn't cried about it in like at least a week or two. And I totally broke down in front of a group of people. So I don't really know. For me, to give everyone some context, I just had my miscarriage in basically a week. Well, it came out about a week ago, but I found out that it was going to happen about a month ago. So we'll dive a little deeper into that. But yeah, this is what we're talking about today. A heavier conversation. And I wanted to introduce you to my dear friends who I met through a leadership program, Devin and Tatiana. We did this leadership program about 4 years ago, a little more than 4 years ago. And, we really connected early on. I was actually going through a breakup of a 4-year relationship. And I met these girls on a Saturday and we had to go out to dinner to get to know our group. And I just was quiet the whole time. And then all of a sudden I burst into tears and just was like, fuck it. I'm just going to tell these girls what I've been dealing with. And so I did. And it instantly connected us so deeply and profoundly. And my birthday was going to be 2 weeks after that day that we literally met. And I had no plans because I just broke up with my boyfriend. And I asked these girls in our group chat, there were 6 of us total, including our coach, and was like, yeah, maybe one of these gals will come out with me. And every single one of them showed up for my birthday dinner, and it was amazing. And then we were just besties since. So that's the story. So I'm very, very excited to have them here on our podcast, Happy Talks. And so I'll go ahead and pass the mic to Devin if you want to say a little something to get us started. To introduce yourself, you're welcome to.
Yeah, first, thank you so much, Alice and Donovan, for having me and having us on here. Love going back down that road of just like how we met, and it's crazy, just so many things that have happened in our lives, really great things, and really things that are life-changing, like what we're talking about today. But we've been connected through it all. So I'm grateful to be able to be here and, share with you all. I have a nursing background. So I've actually worked in the NICU, and I've worked around a lot of traumatic experiences, just naturally in that profession. And I have experienced a lot of death and dying just with that as well. However, I can say, within the last 2 years with the pandemic, I actually experienced a miscarriage twice for myself, my husband and I. And really, for me personally, there hasn't been a grief experience that really could measure to what that has been like. And I do agree, like what with Dr. Alice said, we were talking, I said, one thing that I realized right away was it's not talked about. You don't really know that until you're experiencing it. You get that sense when you're, people maybe share it with you that it's kind of like, oh, I'm not really sure what to say, or, sorry. And, it can be kind of a little awkward to navigate, but when you actually experience it, you're like, oh, wait, this is not discussed. This is not, like normal, natural conversation. Who do I talk to? Who do I share with? Am I the only one that's experiencing this? There's right away a million thoughts and questions that kind of go through your mind. And I was sharing with Dr. Alice, I think there's a podcast out there somewhere. These ladies from, I think, Great Britain, and they have this podcast titled The Worst Girl Gang Ever. And they talk about pregnancy loss and things like that. And I'm like, that's such an accurate thing. It's like one of those things that you don't want to be a part of, but then when you are a part of it, like you don't want to be a part of it. And you're like, man, that's not, well, that's never me. But when you are, it's kind of like, man, it's like, now you're here. And it feels like that. It's like, welcome to the worst girl gang ever. I was like, that's spot on.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Devin. You have been such a huge support for me going through this experience, and it's a sad way to connect, but it was a beautiful way that we got to get reconnected too. Yeah. All right. So now I'd love to introduce my other dear friend, Tatiana. What would you like to introduce or what would you like to share, or how would you like to introduce yourself?
So first of all, I also want to thank you for, having me on for this conversation. I know that it was funny that you shared the story about us first meeting, because I was sitting right next to you and I was like, what is this girl? Like, what is happening? This girl is crying into her soup bowl. Like, what is going on here? But I just always, I just genuinely appreciate your authenticity and your boldness and your willingness to share what you're going through as you're going through it authentically. And I think that will lend itself well to the conversation that we're having today, for sure. Because it, like you all shared, that it's just not something that's talked about, or people just say it. I remember when you called me and you shared with me that you had miscarried. I mean, it was something where I'm like, you say the word miscarriage and it almost doesn't do it justice. Like people just say it, and there's so much weight that can be put behind it. And I'm hoping that in this conversation, as we share more, some of that weight can be lifted, and some of that taboo-ness that comes around sharing these things can go away. And at least that folks can be left with, like, I'm not alone. Yes, this happens. This happens to me, or this has happened to me. For me personally, my journey has been, I would say, different and individual in that I never really seek medical care or attention throughout the pregnancy, one, or throughout the miscarriage. It wasn't until I I missed my second period where I was like, oh, okay, now the morning sickness makes sense. Now the being hungry all the time and the being tired, like all of those things kind of clicked for me. And I'm like, okay, cool, good. Now we need to have a conversation about this. And the person I was with at the time was not about having that conversation. And the stress from that was really ultimately what caused, I believe, the termination of the pregnancy. And, the depression and all of the stuff that was wrapped into that. And I would say that in terms of my grief journey, the place that I immediately went to was denial. I don't have anything to show for it. It wasn't real. The whole thing was in my head. I clearly made this all up, right? And it wasn't until, I think, when I was sharing with you, Devin, that it really gave me the space to kind of open up what I had closed before. So thank you for being that space there, even though, like you said, it's a sad way to connect and reconnect. It's something that I so very much needed to do, because I didn't really tap into the grieving and uncovering those layers. I just kind of bottled it up and threw it somewhere because nobody was talking about it, and I definitely wasn't either, So I'm really excited to go into this conversation more, share more about all of our experiences, and hear just what we have to share, and stay connected in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And well, I guess I'll get started on kind of going more in depth about what happened with me, because there was a lot of things that I didn't know and didn't expect. And for me, I went in for my 10-week checkup, where we were going to see the baby for the first time on the ultrasound. So we were excited. And I thought everything was going along smoothly because I hadn't bled out randomly on one day. So I was like, I think we're good. If I make it to week 10, miscarriage is pretty common actually. The statistics is like around 25%, but according to my midwife, she actually suspects it's like 25 to 50%, which, if you based it off our 6-person girl group, that's half 50% right there. So it is very common and it's not very talked about. And I'm a doctor and I didn't know that, it could just hang out for a while. It can just stop growing and hang out for a while and you won't miscarry for weeks later, which is what ended up happening for me. At the week 10 visit, it looked like it had stopped growing at 7.5 weeks. And I was shocked. They were like, there's no heartbeat. And I was in denial too. I was like, this is a really old ultrasound. Maybe this isn't accurate. I need to get a second opinion. I need to get maybe a third opinion. I don't believe it. I was in shock. Devastating news. I'm thankful though that I had my husband there with me, because originally I was like, oh, well, I have tons of these appointments so you can see the baby whenever. So I didn't but he was there. And so it's like we found out the news together. And we were just heartbroken and we were just processing. And initially I just wanted to put the feelings aside just because it was just so overwhelmingly painful. And I was like, I have a 4:00 Zoom meeting later today. I don't know if I should take it or not. I don't know how I'll feel. We'll see how it goes. And so I kind of I cried about it, but then I just shut down and put it to the side for a moment. So I was able to have my Zoom meeting without a hitch, and it kind of distracted me for the moment. But then after my meeting, I originally was in the mode of, I don't want to talk to anybody about this. This is too painful. I don't want to talk to anyone because I'll just fall apart. And I don't feel like that right now. And so I didn't. And then I went into extreme researcher mode of I need to understand miscarriage more. And I was Googling, and it's is it possible that there could be no heartbeat and it's not at week 10? But the midwife was pretty certain because I had went through the IVF process. There's no question about the dating of it. So it's very likely, most likely, I'm going to be miscarrying it. And that could be a week later. That could be 3 weeks later. We don't know. And so did all this research. Then I was having my breakdown. And then I was like, no, I really need to talk to someone about this because I'm falling apart on my own. And I know for myself from my own personal experiences, when I've gone through difficult, emotionally heavy things, even though I know I don't want to talk to people, I know talking to people, at least people that I trust and I know I can be vulnerable with, that always helps me feel better. So I did it anyways. And so I called up 4 of my girlfriends, 3 of which I had known who'd been through it. None of them answered, but then Tatiana was the first one to text me back and be like, what's up, girl? Then we just hopped on the phone, and she's on the East Coast. So she's talking to me late at night her time, and was so helpful. And she was like, you got to talk to Devin about this. This is so important. And I was like, yeah, I do need to talk to Devin about this. And I got to talk to Devin the next morning. And I just got to share what was happening with me, and I got to hear their stories. And it was really beautiful and connecting, and really what I needed as far as support, because it's nobody will fully get it unless they've been through it themselves. They can have sympathy or empathy and grieve and, have that heartache, but they don't know what it's like until they've been through it themselves. And I had known that these 2 women had been through it, because thankfully our leadership program, I think, has helped us be more communicative and be open to being vulnerable and be able to share the hard stuff, which I'm so grateful for. But yeah, that's kind of how it all began. Just fast forward, I found out at week 10, I was going to let it pass naturally. It literally took, a week went by, nothing happened. Another week went by, nothing happened. 3 weeks after my appointment of finding the initial appointment, I did have a second opinion and then another opinion. That all confirmed it. I had 4 ultrasounds, and then I had my follow-up visit with my midwife. So I had 4 ultrasounds to confirm that it hadn't grown at all in that time. Still no heartbeat after 3 weeks. And so because I had my brother's wedding to attend, which is next week, or actually it's this Friday, I was like, I don't want to miscarry on that day. So I'm going to take the medication and expedite the process. And honestly, it wasn't too bad. It was, I took it at like 7 p.m. on a Tuesday. They say it's supposed to like kick in 1 to 4 hours. For me, it was like 8 hours. So I didn't start cramping until like 3 a.m. And then it was mild, okay, initially, and then it progressively got worse until it was just like unbearable. And then around 6:30 a.m., I knew it came out. I could feel it. It feels like you, honestly, for women that haven't been through it or are about to go through it, for me, it felt like you had to like take a shit, which is not the best feeling. And there's a ton of cramping. And so it did happen on the toilet. So I ran to the toilet and then I could just feel like this big plop come out. And I was pretty sure that was it. And then there was like gushes of blood, and it was like someone died. Oh, well, yeah, it was someone looked terrible. It was just like a giant pool of blood in the toilet, thankfully in the toilet. Yeah, this is very descriptive for anyone who doesn't know the experience. Super bloody, but thereafter, I'm thankful that the cramping was infinitely better, like 95% better. It was just mild, and then there was heavy bleeding for maybe an hour or two, and then it was, for me, I'm thankful it was pretty light. The rest of the week, I'm actually still spotting, and again, because this happened like a week ago. And then yeah, and I hadn't had much cramping. So thankfully, I know for Devin, she had shared that she was like out for at least a week thereafter, but I was actually able to work out like the next day. Just fine. I wasn't like 100%, but I felt good enough to still kind of go about my routine, but still had taken some time off to, make sure I recover. Okay, but that's my story, and that's where I'm at right now. Very, very recent. And yeah, putting it out there. Either of you ladies would like to share your story in more depth?
I will go, especially because I was in the denial camp for a very, very long time. I wasn't even really aware what was happening. It felt like the worst period I'd ever been on in my life. And I don't get, for me, I don't get sick during mine. They're really manageable, quite short. It's not really that big a deal. But I remember for this one in particular, I was like so sick. I was like doubled over, like crying. My mom had to come over and take care of me. I couldn't keep anything down. And I just remember like at one point just being like, the pain was truly unbearable. I was like, this is it. If this is my time to go, please take me. I am in it was, yeah. It was in that moment where I was like, when people say miscarry, I don't think they understand. That's not a good enough word. I need a new word, because it was like pain I had never experienced before. And it was after kind of that point that things kind of subsided, and kind of similar to your story, at that point, just like the bleeding had chilled out. And I think it was after maybe 18 hours or so, I was able to like be a human and be a person, because before it was an experience that I hadn't had, and I hadn't had pain. I mean, and I have a relatively high pain tolerance. I had never experienced anything like that. And that was like, I think the thing that took kind of additional triggers, right? Because I was in the denial camp for a very long time. Those were additional triggers for me to be like, yeah, that wasn't just you didn't just make that up in your head. Those physical cues were real. All of this was real for you. And really kind of helped set it in for me, and then also contributed to like more of that grief stuff. So like I had the denial piece, and then I was like, oh, I really can't deny this. Like there's no like, it's like the pulling the curtain back from Oz, right? Like you can't really go back now that you have seen what you have seen and experienced what you've experienced. So that was kind of my journey, but I'm so glad my mom was there. I was like, I am dying. The world is ending. I don't know what is happening. And in Googling things, that was the crazy part for me. In Googling things, it's like, and then you pass it and it's fine. I'm like, where is the description of near death? Like I couldn't find anything. It literally was just like 1 or 2 words, like, and then you pass, and then you miscarry, and then it's okay. I was like, this is inadequate.
Right.
Not
or
okay.
They describe it as like just really bad period cramps.
Right. Or like
gosh,
heavy bleeding, So, again, super graphic or whatever, but it was just, I was like, none of what I looked up online actually put into words what I was experiencing. So even for then, when I was looking things up, I'm like, maybe that wasn't what I experienced, because these are all really nice words for what I went through, So, and, for context, I miscarried I conceived in August of 2018 and then miscarried in October. So I was like, where is the documentation? And then of course, when I start having these conversations and looking into it, it's, the 25% statistic. And since there was no medical documentation, I'm probably in the percentage that kind of takes it over that to 25 to 50%, right? Because I didn't go to anyone. I was so ashamed. I'm not married, so things would have gone one way or the other. So I didn't really know who to go to and what to talk. Like there were just so many pieces wrapped up into that. So I didn't go to anyone, and I was like, not going to have a conversation with anyone about it. And I honestly didn't share. I think I didn't even share it with anyone, not even my twin or my best friend, for probably over a year and a half.
Wow.
I was just not comfortable sharing it because it was just such a painful thing to experience. And I couldn't deal with the shame. So I didn't go anywhere. I didn't report it. I think last year was the first year I actually reported it at my OB-GYN's appointment, where I was like, yes, I have had one pregnancy. No, it resulted in loss, that whole conversation. And it took me it's 2021, 2022. So it's a really it took me a long way to get to this point, and even be able to speak it and share about it without being like, I didn't even put mascara down here because I already knew. I was like, I don't even know. You don't know.
No eye makeup today.
So that was just, my personal experience.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And I think there's a lot of women in your camp that, go super long years, maybe, without telling anyone about it. And that's what we're hoping to change it. Like, it's your choice on when you feel comfortable to share it, but to have people feel like it's nothing to be ashamed of, and it's very common, and it's okay. Yeah. All right. So, Devin,
I'm just
you've been through a lot, and you've been through 2. So where would you like to start your story?
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking, like, as I'm listening to both of you share and just the stories, and then of course reflecting on my own, like just how beautiful it is, like we said, to have this conversation, because we're 3 out of many, many women, but even in just us 3 here, like there's 3 totally different stories, scenarios, how we shared it, how we maybe didn't share it, what we, the pain level, all the different things. So and mine has the factor of it happening during the pandemic, during COVID, which in itself was already, I think, traumatic for everybody in different ways. So yeah, my then fiance at the time and I, we found out we were pregnant, of course, very excited. I'm very in tune with my body, so I could kind of tell that I was having like some of the pre-pregnancy symptoms, like, okay, like I'm getting like kind of nauseous, and certain foods are like kind of grossing me out, and my sense of smell, all of the things. And so I was like, okay. And then of course, we kind of thought we were pregnant before we even took the test, just based off going off that. And so when it confirmed, we're excited. And I remember at that time trying to call and get an appointment with the midwife at that time. And I think we found out at the very end of May, and they were like, you have to wait until early July to come in for your first appointment. And I remember I was freaking out because again, the only thing when I called, they're just like, yeah, are you taking a prenatal? Okay, great. When was your first, the first day of your last period? And that's it. And so I'm thinking, again, with a medical background, I'm like, I know some things, but that's because I have just a background of a little bit more knowledge. But I'm like, this is all they say to people. Like when you call, like they don't ask you any other questions, you know, how are you feeling? Are you okay? So that really threw me off. I'm like, well, what if I didn't know anything about anything? You know what I mean? So I was like, okay, that was interesting. And then I really think I totally stressed a lot because I'm like, July, like, you know, what if something is wrong and I don't know what's wrong? I mean, it just seemed like an eternity to me, like back then, to wait that long to first see someone, right? And I just remember having a lot of unease and anxiety. Again, I don't know if it's kind of like I knew something was off and that was like my intuition, which looking back, probably so. But at that time, I just remember being very anxious. Naturally, at that time I was working out, but I remember I don't really want to run. I don't really want to do the things that I know to do. I was kind of freaking out and I didn't know who to ask. And yes, you Google things and you get like 20 different answers. Yes, work out. No, don't do this. So then that adds to the anxiety. Right. So it's like, totally. Okay. And then you may ask around, like maybe I ask my mom and ask someone else, you know, you get different responses. So there was just a lot of uncertainty for me, but I made it to the appointment. And then that was also uncertain because I had to go in by myself. During COVID, no one was allowed to go with you. At that time, they did allow that you could have your significant other be FaceTimed in while they're doing the ultrasound, which is it's just weird. It's so weird. It's like, what? It's weird, right? So I'm in there by myself. Of course, I'm nervous. You know, it's my first time. And I go to get the FaceTime ready. And I think it was the midwife, she's going to start the ultrasound. And again, just having the medical background, I've been in the conversations where you kind of know there's something going on without them saying there's something going on. So that was kind of like, now my fiance, he couldn't pick up on that because he could barely hear what was going on. He doesn't know either. He's just kind of listening in, waiting to hear like whatever good news. I'm paying attention to her and she's not saying much as she's doing it. And I'm kind of like, okay. And I'm like nervous. Then starts asking me some questions. How far do you think you are, etc. And she's like, I'm going to write an order for you to go next door to get the transvaginal ultrasound. So just to get a further look, she's like, I can't really see what I'm seeing, but what I'm thinking is that you might have what's called a blighted ovum. And I'm like, what are you talking about, lady? I don't even know what that is. I've never heard of that in my life. Like, what? A what? She's like, so basically what happens is your body does, it's kind of close to like a chemical pregnancy where your body does, you know, think you're pregnant, has all the signs and symptoms of you being pregnant. Your body, as far as it knows, thinks you're pregnant. But at some point, like the signals got mixed and like it stops actually developing the pregnancy. So what happens is you have like on the ultrasound, they can see the sac where the baby should be forming, but there's nothing inside of the sac. So you talk about, Tatiana, like the denial. Okay, now I feel like I'm crazy. What do you mean? Like I'm pregnant, but I'm not pregnant. There was a baby, there's not a baby. You know, your mind starts going like crazy. Like, did I make up these symptoms? Kind of what you shared, Tatiana. So that's the first thing that's going. And then I can relate to what you said, Alice, where I'm like, okay, well, is this the only opinion? Because I don't like, do I ask someone else? Like, are we sure? What do we do? So of course they had me come back like a week or two later to see, like, you know, by that point they would be able to see if like the growth was going down, et cetera, and confirm. Had to get blood work done to see like pregnancy levels. So not only do you hear it one time, then you're going for 2, 3, like you said, Alice, like appointments to then like reconfirm the thing that you kind of already know. Right. And it's just shocking, you know, and I think then having to be in the room alone, trying to be strong, and then my fiance, he didn't know what was going on because he couldn't really hear. So then when I got in the car, our daughter was in the car too. So then I had to like re-explain it to him because what's going on? What's happening? So, you know, I'm trying to re-explain. I barely understand myself. That was really tough. And given the same options as you were, Alice, the I guess standard options of you can let it pass naturally. You can take the medication to like make it come on faster, or you can do the DNC. You know, so surgery, right, to remove. They prescribed the medication, and my fiance and I, we talked it over, and we just, I don't know, I just didn't personally at the time feel comfortable doing it. So we chose to do natural. And that first time, I do remember I didn't have any spotting or anything leading up to. I think it maybe took maybe a couple of weeks after I had those initial appointments. And then it was the middle of the night. I do remember that. Middle of the night, I was like woken up in my sleep. And like Tatiana said, I don't know where they got this. Oh, it's like a really bad period with really bad cramps. That is the most, I think that's one of the biggest things for me that drives me crazy. Because I'm like, maybe for some, but I'm like, oh my gosh. I remember I was literally like on all fours on our bedroom floor. And I'm like kind of just crying and screaming, like, I want my mom here. You know, my fiance was there and he was great, but he, you know, he's freaking out. He doesn't know what to do. He's like, are you okay? Like, you know, so it's very traumatic on that side too, for partners. And then I'm like, I just want my mom. In my mind, I felt like if I was in labor, this is probably what I would be asking for. Like, where's my mom? I need my mom here. And I remember, like you said, the sensations of like feeling like I had to use a bathroom. Like number 2, especially, and in my head, knowing and being around like labor and delivery like situations, that's a lot of the same sensations that, you know, that women have when they're in delivering a baby. They're like, I have to use the bathroom. Sometimes they do use the bathroom, you know, like, so I'm like, wow, in my mind afterwards, I'm like, this is to me more like I've never experienced labor and giving birth, but if I had to come think if something close to it, it's pretty close. So it far missed the mark for me of like, oh, it's just like a heavy period, heavy bleeding, you know, just let us know if you go through more than one pad, like with blood, and you're not even thinking, I'm sorry, when it's in the middle of the night, what's happening? Okay. So I just had to say that, maybe it's just me, but it's the middle of the night and you're like everything that Alice described to a T, all the graphicness of that. And you're just constantly on and off the toilet because you're like, you don't know what's going on. Like, do I have to poop? Like, what's going on? There's blood. I mean, you're not thinking like, is this pad number 1, pad number 2, pad number, like, so it's just absurd to me. Like you're like thinking, am I like you said, am I gonna like bleed out? Is this the point where I need to call someone because this is like too much blood? Like, you don't know what's coming next. And if you've never like talked to someone beforehand that has actually experienced, whatever they tell you is not it. So like, it's a false representation of that. And so just very traumatic after that. I do know afterwards, maybe after a week or so, I did feel like I could get back into my normal swing of things, working out. I do remember I did share pretty early on. I asked, you know, my fiance at the time, like, are you okay with me sharing this? Like I did a Facebook post about it. And that was kind of my way of releasing what I wanted to get out of my mind. And it also was my way of, I guess, not having myself be in denial, like to really acknowledge like this was real and this really happened to me. And, you know, I didn't want to pretend like it didn't. And that at that time, you know, felt therapeutic, and actually shared on a podcast, but another friend, mutual friend of ours, that she works a lot with grief. She wrote a book on grief. And she asked me to share, and it was probably a month or so after. And I was like, okay. And, you know, and that was my first experience. Not too long. That was 2020, July of 2020, spring, what was it? Spring, March of 2021, we found out that we were pregnant again. And of course we're excited, but then there's the anxiety of, do you tell people? Do you not tell? So there's all kinds of, do you tell people? Do you not tell people? Do you wait the 12 weeks? And what I had decided then was, I said, I think before, this was my thing at the time, I said, I think before my, like the whole don't tell people until you're 12 weeks, I thought that added more pressure to me because I felt all these changes. I'm around people all the time. I'm on Zoom all the time. And I'm like, I feel like I'm being inauthentic and I'm trying to hide something, but this is really what I'm feeling. So we discussed that maybe it was best if we just shared with people very close to us, our family, maybe a few close friends, so that it wasn't so much pressure on like keeping this big secret. So that's what we chose to do. So we did share. We actually did find another midwife, just because I felt going to that same place for me felt like that would be probably pretty traumatic. So we found another facility. They were great. you know, they were great with consoling and all that, but I just think visually there's just things that to me it was like, no, don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So we found another facility. We went, and this time we're excited because he was able to go with me. So we were able to go together, and, you know, we were excited. They did not do ultrasounds inside of that facility. You have to go to another place to do the ultrasound. So we had our appointment with the midwife. That was great. Questions answered. Went to get the ultrasound. Again, I felt a little unease. They weren't really saying much in there. And so for me, I'm like, that's either good or bad, but whatever. And it was actually very weird. I remember you're in the stirrup things, the leg stirrups.
Yeah.
Also,
Yeah.
that's another podcast.
Right.
But you're in the stirrups, and I remember like my legs are shaking uncontrollably. Like I think I'm just freaking out, and they're like, you gotta relax. You know, they're trying to get me to stop shaking, and I'm like shaking. And he couldn't come into the room for the ultrasound at the time. He had to come in like at the end, like when they were about to show. But like initially, I had to go by myself. So I'm like freaking out because I think there was some probably PTSD from the first ultrasound, and it's not comfortable anyway. Like ladies know. So there's that.
Yeah.
It's just traumatic in itself. So then they're like trying to get me in a position that can kind of work so they could do what they need to do without me like shaking. And then they called him in. They're like, we'll go get your fiance. He can come in. And so he comes in, you know, he's nervous. And I remember the tech, because it wasn't the actual doctor, but the tech was going over and showing, and she showed, because we were supposed to be able to hear the heartbeat, but I didn't think about it until after. But she showed the picture and was like, here you go, there's like the baby right there. And then when she left, she's like, you know, congrats, mom and dad, like kind of said that thing. And so I was like, okay. And we got the printout of the pictures, and it was a weird feeling, but I just was looking at it, and in my mind, I'm like, the baby looks really small. I just remember saying that we're in the car, and I'm like, the baby looks really small. I'm not really sure, like, but you know, they didn't say anything to me. So I'm like, all right, everything must be fine. Like, you know, the baby looked very small. Just, I think I was supposed to be close to 10 weeks or around 10 weeks at that time. But I still did the whole, like, you know, call my parents and my sisters and FaceTime and, hey, we did this. And and it was about a week later, because it was around this time of year. It was the first week of April, actually, the very end of March. And I was working, and I got a call from my midwife. I couldn't answer at the time, so she sent a text just saying like, hey, can you give me a call when you get a chance? So I give her a call, and she said, I just spoke with the was it radiologist? I forget whoever does the doctor that reviews those, and you know, they said that they did not see or hear a heartbeat. And it was like, again, I'm alone. Like I was at my friend's nutrition shop. I was running it by myself that day, so no one was there with me, and luckily no customers. And I just remember being in the back, and I just lost it. I broke down crying. I called the owner, who luckily lives down the street. I said, you have to come here. Like, you have to come in here. I can't be here. And I called my fiance, and like he was just like, I'm coming. Like, you know, he had to come and like drive me home. And you know, we go to the appointments. They confirm, you know, again, do the same thing, confirm all the things to confirm. We chose to do naturally again. And I remember the midwife telling me something different this time. I think I shared that with you, Alice. She said, you know, when you have this miscarriage and this happens, she's like, I want you to treat this like your postpartum for the first several weeks. And I remember her saying that to me, like, what do you mean postpartum? Like, you know, no one told me that before. And this time was very different. It was actually the entire month of April that I did not pass the baby. So didn't know when it was going to come. My birthday was April 10th. I was like, you know, came and gone. And I'm thinking like, I don't know if I'm going to miscarry my baby today or not. We had a trip planned to Florida that we still went on around my birthday. So I'm packing a heating pad and these things that I'm like, I don't know if it's going to happen while we're there. So very much like, just don't know.
Yeah.
And it happened towards the end of the month. And again, it was this time just kind of late morning, staying pain level, very excruciating, very just like, told my fiance, you got to come home. Like, you have to be like, so it was just very tough that time too. And I do know that the second time for me afterwards was a lot. I felt like it was exactly what she said. I mean, for a couple of weeks, I just was like, I couldn't, like, I was still in a lot of pain, not bleeding or anything, but just a lot of pain. And I couldn't get back into just like, let me jump in and work out or do these things. I could tell it definitely took a different toll on my body, really for like months, to be honest with you. If I'm being, it was for like months after that it had a toll. And I was okay with sharing, but I definitely could tell that after the second time, I definitely probably closed up more. And my emotions were definitely a lot more all over the place. It was said earlier, like the grief has been, it's not, someone shared that, like, it's not linear, you go through all the stages, sure, but it's like 1 minute I can be sharing about it like this and I'm composed. But I mean, a week ago or 2 weeks ago, I probably couldn't talk to anybody. And I'm just like crying every day and not knowing what's wrong. So, and it just comes when it comes, like, you don't get a notice. It's just like, okay, we're in grief mode today. So very, very crazy, experience.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing your story. And I feel you. It was such a roller coaster. It's kind of mellowed out since I found out a month ago. It was way more intense emotional roller coaster like the first week out, but it's still like it hits you when you don't even know it's going to hit you, and then you just let it happen. I allowed myself permission to have my feelings when I have them, and we don't know when it will happen. But anyways, I know we've been chatting for a long time, and Donovan is probably just being like mind blown, ask some questions. So I wanted to give you, Donovan, an opportunity to ask any questions or share your thoughts or anything that you'd like.
Yeah, well, the first thing I want to do is just thank you all for sharing. I mean, I'm sure it's useful for people who have gone through the experience, but as someone who cannot go through the experience and as an outsider, it's definitely eye-opening, in the sense that, before, like you were saying, had I heard the word miscarriage, I would have carried it around with the same weight that it's probably thrown around generally. And now knowing what the actual experience is like, I'm a little bit wiser about how you should be using that word, and just the depth of, I knew that it was sort of like a negative experience for people, right? Like that's pretty well known, but the actual depth of both the physical and emotional strain going through that experience is not something that I would have known otherwise. So that's the first thing, is I just want to say thank you for sharing and letting me just hang out for this conversation. One of the top of mind questions for me is, as someone in this position, what is the most useful thing that I, or, a general person could do to help support someone through this process, if there is anything? And one of the themes that I kind of heard was around shame. So if there is something that would specifically allow sort of a third party or a listener or somebody trying to help someone else through that journey not activate that emotion, right? Because that's what I heard, is that's like an extra sensitive piece. I would just be curious if there's anything that would be useful, or that you would have liked to have seen from people as they've heard about this experience, or just anything that would have been helpful.
I'll start, and then I'll give each of these ladies an opportunity to share on it, because I'll try to be quick. For me, the hard thing is just like, I think the best way someone can support me as I was going through it, if I told them, because I, like Devin, I told people that I was pregnant to people I would, very small, very, very close friends and family. And I knew if I had a miscarriage, then I'd also have to tell them that. But part of it was like, I was going through IVF and they knew that, so they were going to ask about it anyways. But I think it's just letting that person know that you're there for them, and I'm here for support. If you just want to be here and you want to talk about it, great. If you don't want to talk about it, that's okay too. Like giving that person space for either ways, because there's moments where I do not want to talk about it at all, And there's moments where I do. And I have no idea which mood I'll be in at any given time. So it's like, just give me space, check in here and there, without any expectation that, like, I might not respond. I might not be like up to just saying, yeah, I'm okay, or I'm still a mess. But just letting them know that you're there for them, I think, is just the biggest thing. Did you want to add anything, Tatiana?
Yeah, I think because no one knew for me and I was like in denial for so long, I think one, it for sure would have helped to have shared more about it. But I think a lot of the shame for me was like, I'm not married and I wasn't, the person that I was with. So there was so much more like societal pressure for me to keep things under wraps. And, that's a whole nother conversation for a whole nother day around what women should and shouldn't do and how you like, what's the right time to have a child and who says you can't have one with that, so that's like a whole nother conversation. But I think the thing that for me would have made more of a difference in the moment is something that I discovered when I shared or was first speaking about this with Devin, is that when you share or when people say that they had a miscarriage, it's almost like whispered in a corner, like, oh yeah, I had a miscarriage, or, oh, she miscarried. I really think that something that would have helped is saying it. And then instead of being like, oh my gosh, like, like, I get that it's like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, but almost like taking some of that away, like, oh my gosh, it's so sorry. And like, is there something that I can do? The answer may be no. It may be yes, it may be no, but just like listening for what, like just hearing what I'm saying, right? Because so many times people just say miscarriage and they're like, whoa, no, sorry to, like thoughts and prayers.
Yeah.
Right. Like condolences, thoughts and prayers, go over there with that. But for me, I'm like, no, there was like a physiological experience that happened and, all of the graphic stuff. And I'm like, who do you, and people don't want to share about that when someone's like, oh, you've had a miscarriage. It's like, there's this gravity. I would have loved to have less gravity around it. And I get that some of that is just, you don't know what to say. Like if someone's passed, you just don't know what to say to them. But it's almost like, if you know of someone or if you experience that, like, be okay with being uncomfortable with them because that person's uncomfortable. And then like, it doesn't have to be so heavy. It just is what it is. Right. Mm-hmm. So I think that's something that definitely would have helped me.
Great.
So good.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. Spot on. Mine is right around with that. I just use this analogy because I just remember I was so angry about it at one point, but there is this weirdness about like, you say miscarriage and it's like, oh, yep, prayer hands, walk away, don't know, right? And I remember what like brought light to that was like, just like I said, on social media, I just was seeing like, let's say, someone has lost their pet, their dog, also very emotional, right? And I just remember like the comments though, right? If you're looking at just like flooding, oh my gosh, I remember this one that happened to mine. And, there's a lot more compassion. And I remember one day, like just in my grief process, I was so angry because I'm like, for our pets, right, that we love to as much as we do humans, right? We get it. Like there's so much that people can share and say and support. But the minute you kind of mention like, well, I had a miscarriage, it's like, like Tatiana said,
like,
it's very
crickets.
It's like, ooh, oh, yeah.
Like, ooh, don't want to touch that.
Thinking of you, bye. Like, it's very weird.
Yeah.
And so I remember I just had a really hard time with that. I'm like, I think in just the acknowledging of like, that at the heart of it, it's a human being. It's a baby. It's your baby. It's like saying the actual words, like loss of a child, loss of a baby. I think I had to get very real with that. And so I think sometimes for me, if you're not knowing what to say, people try to fill in the I'm sorry or like kind of say things that they may mean well, but I've had those experiences where it was like, yeah, that didn't help. That was not great. So it's almost better to just offer, like Tatiana said, and Alice, like, I'm here if you need anything. I think just being a space where someone can be open if they want to share or not share, cry if they want to cry, not cry, is really a lot more than it goes a long way. Like it means a lot more than they probably would even say.
Yeah. I know for myself, like I went through so many emotions and I had urges like my brother, for one, I didn't want to get into the gruesome details with him, but he wanted to support me in the way that he was able to. And so I was like, well, I do have an urge to just like be out in nature and not talk. If you want to do that with me, we could do that. So we did that, and we talked a little about life and his upcoming wedding and things like that. And that was helpful for me. But for other people, you know, I like with you girls who've been through it, I did want to talk about it in more depth because it's like I knew that you would get it, that you would get it on a deeper level. So it's kind of, it depends. And then for another friend, I had suggested I had an urge to just scream like really loudly and just like out in the middle of another. I haven't set up the date with that friend yet, but that's like what I want to do with her. just scream really loudly and get that grief out that way. But yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to add one other piece, kind of along the lines of what you were saying, Devin. To if you see someone dealing with that, to really treat it like postpartum. And if you see someone and you know someone is usually out and about and they're outgoing, they may be wanting to deal with it themselves, but really check in on their well-being. Like, are they not cooking for themselves? Like, are they really not able to get up? And if that's cool, you don't even have to comment on it. You can just be like, hey, yo, I brought you over some snacks. Here's a dinner. If you want to come over, dinner is ready, just being that type of way with the person, just like opening a door, right? Because if you see someone dealing with that, they may not want to speak about it, but everybody needs to eat, right? So you could always offer something like that, or like, hey, can I just, I was thinking about you. Can we just grab a glass of wine? Or like, if you know your people and you know that that's something that in a way that you can help, that's something that I would definitely say. Because like having my mom there with like Gatorade and crackers, that was the move right there. That's definitely not something I was going to ask for,
So good. So good. Yeah. Thank you for saying that postpartum depression and just postpartum, I think is such a huge, again, it's like another podcast on its own, but there's a lot, especially recently, about postpartum depression and really how people check in with that and noticing signs of that. And yet you don't think about it with a miscarriage, but it is postpartum and your body has experienced the same hormones, the same changes without actually physically, like Tatiana was saying, like having the proof of, bringing home a baby. So to think that there may not be any like depression or like those same things is absolutely absurd, because it definitely is happening, whether they're talking about it or not. I can say for myself. And I think it's important to talk about. And I think for males or partners of whoever's dealing with the miscarriage partners, it's a great conversation and question to ask, like, or talk with them, like how they can support. I think, my husband now, like, he had a hard time with this. I know he would ask a lot of friends at work who maybe their significant others experience it and how did they handle it. And, sometimes I'm crying and I can't even articulate what I'm feeling, but even just like Tatiana said, the acts of service. And then also, I know for me, it was helpful. Like sometimes you don't have to say anything, kind of like Alice said, just being in your company and like just the back rub, like, or the, something like that is just, it makes you feel like, okay, I'm not alone. I'm supported.
Right. Yeah. That is really what I want to emphasize, is making sure that she doesn't feel like she's alone. It's like, you don't have to say anything, but she knows that you've got her back. And actually I have to give a shout out to my friend Jillian, one of my best friends from med school, who's also been through it. And she sent me a care package. I remember she just sent like an Amazon Fresh Prime or whatever, and it showed up at my door. I remember she told me it was going to be coming, but she didn't tell me the exact date of it. And so it like showed up, and I thought someone had misordered it, or the delivery driver was sending it to the wrong address. And I was like, no, this isn't the right. And I was like, what's the name on it? And it was my name. And I was like, did I butt dial this on my sleep? I was like, what, was in such a depression that I just ordered things, and I slept order Amazon packages. And then I remembered. I was like, oh yeah, she said she was going to send me a package. I forgot. And it was such a sweet thing of goodies and snacks. So very much appreciated. All right. Well, I think we've had a pretty in-depth conversation. Was there, did you have any other questions, Donovan, or was there anything else left to be said between you ladies?
I do have one more question.
Yeah.
Which is one of the other themes that I kind of heard repeated was getting information that was either not accurate or not that helpful.
Mhm.
And I would just be curious if there are any, before we close, any specific resources or groups or whatever that you were able to find that actually did help you through. Because it sounds like a lot of this journey is personal in nature. So, for some people, they might share, they might not. But just if people have access to other resources that they can go look at that might help them through, I would be curious if there's anything that helped. Because I heard about a lot of Google searches that didn't quite do it.
didn't pan out. Yeah, Google was not so helpful. For me, my sister did send me a link to like pregnancy loss, miscarriage support groups in Sacramento area. I did look into it, but because I had friends that I knew had been through it, I decided to kind of lean on them rather than the support group. So but for those who don't have the friends that they feel comfortable sharing with, I'd highly recommend it. I'm sure in most metropolitan areas at least have some sort of support group, or there's probably Zoom support groups too. So anyone anywhere could access them.
Yeah.
Did you have anything else to add? Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think that being able to share with the people around me made the biggest difference. Google's a little removed and you never know what you're going to find on there. Honestly, I mean, it's just at your own risk, right? With an asterisk.
Yeah.
Okay. Like I'm not saying there aren't really great resources out there. I'm just saying that I know for me personally, it really helped. Even my friends who hadn't experienced that, but who had experienced pregnancy or had gone through fertility issues, just any of those types of things, or even if they hadn't and were just curious, it really helped me to just talk with the people that were around me. And then I will say that the book that you recommended to me, Devin, the one by Jen Hale, Good Morning, that was tremendous for me. It's an excellent book. Jen wrote it about really in tribute to and about her mother and her grieving process around her mother passing. And it really, I remember, I don't even know what page I got to, but that was the page that I had to listen to or read to really release most of the grief that I had. I just remember reading that page or paragraph and just bawling. And it was like in that moment, I was able to release like a year and a half of grief that I hadn't allowed myself to have. So for me, that was definitely an excellent resource. I would highly recommend that.
Yeah, so good. I thank you, because I was going blank on what the book was called, but I do remember reading that the first time, and it was forever grateful for that. Google, no. But it's just no. It's for anything, any type of diagnosis. Don't do Google diagnosis, just no. But Instagram, honestly, I don't know if I typed in miscarriage or pregnancy loss. I just happened to come across like a couple of different pages. Some of them I would look at and some of them I followed. I don't stay on there like constantly, but they pop up. And a lot of times I like those more for some of the, like just the posts that will get posted. For instance, Donovan, like the question you asked, like what to say, what not to say. Sometimes they'll have like, hey, this is something you can share with your friends of like what's helpful and not helpful. So I've learned a lot, and like reading through some other people's experiences and those tips and things that are shared on sites like that. But overall, like the lady said, I think that the biggest thing is to make sure that you are just in community. It may or may not be like a community of people who have women who have also experienced this, but it may just be a community that you feel safe, you feel heard, you feel supported. I'm a part of a healthy, active lifestyle community, so that has been helpful for me inside of this, because I've had a lot of things that have gone on with my body, and just like, just trying to stay positive in that. And then, whatever it is, whether it's spiritual or just an awesome friend group like these ladies, the community has been the best, because there's been a lot of times where I just felt very isolated, as I'm sure, Alice and Tatiana have. And then especially with coming out of like the pandemic, there was a lot of isolation in that. So that's another level of it. So it's just have it, even if it's just one person, make sure, I would say just connect, share what you want to share. You may not have to talk about your experience, but just someone that you can just, be yourself with and spend time however you want to spend the time and connect with.
Yeah, such great recommendations. I did actually remember me and my husband, we see a couples therapist, mainly for maintenance every like month or two to check in. And she actually knew about our IVF process. And so we got to share about the miscarriage at our last appointment. And we were like, do you have any recommendations on how to process the grief? Because my husband, I felt like I was able to move through. I mean, I'm still moving through it, but I feel thankful that I have enough like emotional and personal development to be able to know what I need to do to move through the grief. But she had recommended, and we both did this exercise of writing a letter to the unborn child, the baby. And that was really beautiful and like helped me get more complete about the whole situation. So for anyone that's going through it, that's something you can do to help you with that processing.
Wow. Yeah, powerful.
Yeah. All right. Well, ladies, I am so thankful for you just joining me on this podcast, but more so just having you in my life, especially through this really difficult time. It means the world to me. You ladies we've been through a lot together, individually together. So it's like, I know I can count on you for really anything. And I'm so grateful for that. All right. Well, I guess that wraps up this very heavy show. I hope anyone who's out there, who's going through this experience, who's been through the experience, if you don't feel like you have anyone to talk to about it, you can leave a comment for us. You reach out to us. Well, I'm happy to talk to a stranger about the experience if you want, because it's like Devin says, it's joining the club that nobody wants to join, but once you're there, it's like it connects us through this heavy kind of traumatic experience. So I want to put that out there for any ladies who've been through it or who are going through it. And thank you to my co-host Donovan for being here and supporting me. He is very supportive. I actually, the day after I had found out the news, we were going to record an episode, and I was like a freaking mess. And Donovan was like, "We don't need to record." And I was like, "Yeah, I didn't think we were going to record, but I did want to tell him." Because he's a part of my life and I see him every week on our show. So I appreciate you for being support as well in your own way. Yes. And thank you everyone for tuning in to this episode. We really appreciate you. And if you appreciate us, be sure to spread the happiness in the world by sharing, liking, subscribing, or doing all the things that help get this out into the world. Yeah. Any final last thoughts from anyone?
Thank you. Just thank you for having this conversation and for providing the space. I remember when we were sharing, like even when talking with Devin or when you shared with me, Alice, just being like, there needs to be a space for this to be talked about. Right? And it doesn't even have to just be an exclusively, female space. I mean, I think that there's definitely a space for where like partners and spouses and the men who are going through it as well, it's a totally different experience for them. So I really appreciate you being, bold and authentic and starting the conversation and really allowing it to be a space where people can share. So thank you for that. And thank you for having us on.
Yeah. Ditto. Just, thank you for the space. I don't think there's enough opportunities yet for this, where this is just kind of more commonly shared. And, it's beautiful. I think when we can hear stories and come together, and it takes some courage and yes, really too, Donovan, like, thank you for your courage for being in this conversation where it may or may not, for sometimes, males or again, those who have not gone through the situation to be like comfortable being in this space. But thank you for your curiosity to ask the questions and, coming from where you're sitting and where you're listening. And so super grateful to be a part of the conversation, and thank you both for, your platform to share.
Awesome. Well, yes, thank you again for just who you are and who you are for me. I love you, girls.
And yes, love you. Wish you were not all the way on the West Coast.
I know. I love you. All right. Well, we'll have to plan another girl trip one of these days.
Oh, yes.
Yes. All right.
Have to do.
For sure. All right. Thanks everyone again for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like it and then go and subscribe to my channel and ring the bell so you get notified when the next video comes out. And if you check out in the description below, go to my website where you can get my free fast and easy guide to stress relief. Thanks again for checking us out, and we'll see you next time.